One of the things that completely sucks about being a gamer for so long is that I have to watch as things slowly change around me, and as a consumer there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. I'm basically forced to go down a chosen path and be at the mercy of any and all current trends, and if I don't like it, then I guess that's tough. Now, that's not to say that all change is bad, but I think there are certain things that we can all agree are bad and aren't really good for anyone. I mean, really, does anyone like, and I'm being deadly serious here by the way, does anyone like 5GB day one patches? Does anyone like overpriced DLC? Does anyone actually like this constant push to have more and more digital only restriction that only serves the one doing the restricting? And after a while, it comes to a point when you really have to start wondering where all these changes came from. And if you've been around for more than 15 years, you only have to think about it for a few seconds before you come up with an answer. And with Project Scorpio on the horizon, it seemed like now was the best time to talk about this, and to do that, I have to start at the beginning and try to give an overall clear image. So back in 2002, something happened. Something amazing and wondrous and groundbreaking. The original big ass chunky brick of a console was released, the Xbox. Compared to everything else, it seemed fresh and new. It was something glamorous, a step in the right direction that saw all new innovations and better, more convenient functionality for the user. It was the first console to use built-in memory, so no memory cards, and it was also the first to have a built-in Ethernet port and a dedicated platform to play games online. Online gaming on a console was a relatively new thing back then. Other consoles had experimented with the idea before, but for the Xbox it was a major feature and a really good first step.
The design here was driven by spending time with gamers. One of the unbelievable things here is that we have a hard disk, and so the information about the game will already be stored. You don't have to load it off the disk or load it as you move. And 4 game ports. That was one of the big pieces of feedback, was people didn't want to be limited to 2. These games where lots of people can participate, we wanted to make it easy to have 4 people.
At the time, it seemed like Microsoft was genuinely trying to push console gaming forwards with the accessibility of a PC, but on a solid universal platform without all that added hassle. But little did we know, these 2 innovations would be the slow, agonising death of the console platform thereafter. And I'm sorry for the melodrama, and yet I'm not sorry because it's true. For a few years following the release of the Xbox, a few good franchises were started, new ideas were taking shape and being considered, games were becoming bigger and bolder. The seeds of change had been planted, but for Microsoft it just wasn't growing fast enough. It's clear they weren't making the impact they initially wanted, positive change or not. They were still leagues behind Sony, who had a huge lead over the competition already. So instead of playing the slow game, they went into full attack mode and used their considerable influence to not just target gamers, but instead set their sights on a wider audience. They'd set out to conquer the mass market. And just like that, the game industry changed forever. In 2005, the Xbox 360 was released, and there was much rejoicing. When it was first launched, it had a massively huge impact, and everyone was drawn in. Everything about it was dazzling. The graphics, the look, the games, the logo for crying out loud. The 360 was designed to beguile, using style over substance. They'd subtly included features that seemed positive on the surface, but in reality only served Microsoft. The Xbox now had a huge internal memory, 20GB, more than double the original Xbox, which even then was unprecedented. But why? Sure, games were getting larger, but even so, save data was never more than a few megabytes at most. Did they really expect you to use the system to store music and other media? No, the reason at the time was downloadable online games, bought through the best, most stable platform for online console gaming. Now, you could purchase smaller games at exaggerated prices, and you could pay a subscription service to play those games and others online. And of course, they'd made it very simple, quick, and convenient. On top of that, all these games now had achievement points, which seemed like an innocent, quirky addition, but it wasn't, was it? Hands up, how many people bought a game specifically for the achievement points? I know I did. I fell into the trap just like everyone else. They'd basically introduced slot machine mentality into every single game they released. They pop up with that little jingle and you're filled with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. You need more, you need all the achievement points. But some achievements could only be earned online, which meant you had to pay a subscription if you wanted all of them. You had to buy more, smaller, conveniently bought games from the arcade, which were then stored on your larger hard drive. Genius. Absolute genius. They had devised a perfect system that fed off of and into itself. Does any of this sound familiar? Because it should. But it didn't stop there, did it? Oh no, this was just the beginning.
In the next generation, Xbox 360 will transform the way people play games and have fun. In the next generation, video games will become an essential component of global pop culture.
1 year later, the PlayStation 3 was released, and by this time the gaming public had already pretty much been conditioned by Microsoft and the 360. So in order to appease current demand and stay with what now was trending, Sony had little choice but to follow suit. So as a result, PlayStation became a clone that mimicked all the features that had been released with the Xbox. Large storage capacity to facilitate online purchases, an online gaming platform, and achievement points. Meaningless achievement points. Now the damage was done. The gaming landscape had thoroughly changed. While Nintendo for the most part tried to stick to more traditional routes with the Wii, the gaming headliners were always the 360 and the PS3 in a never-ending battle for supremacy. Graphics, again, were fast becoming the most important factor in video games. The style over substance mentality was gradually seeping into everything. Games were being made to dazzle, with the emphasis being made on short-term appeal. Longevity was being discarded to make way for status, and all of a sudden yearly franchise releases were becoming more and more common. And while all this was happening, Microsoft showed off yet another closely guarded hand. Mere months after the 360's launch, Oblivion was released. And yeah, you know where this is going. Horse armor. The DLC that started it all, the catalyst. How in the love of Christ did this ever catch on? Just remembering it makes me cringe, because it worked. It was new, it was exciting. I think I bought it. Horse armor? Seriously, £2 for a couple of horse skins? Who is responsible for this? Do I even need to answer at this point?
With Xbox 360, we've created technology that will enable people from every age and every corner of the planet to gather together in new ways. A product with games at its core, surrounded by limitless, connected digital entertainment.
It must have been planned for years. A console built with a large hard drive that could hold DLC, and they owned the marketplace that held the exclusive rights to this DLC, which meant of course they took a cut. Genius. And remember, this was months before the PS3 was even released, so no doubt Sony was furiously making note of all of these successful decisions. Now, not too long after the PS3 hit the market, things took an even stranger turn, at least to me. Gaming was becoming mainstream. Now, this might come as a surprise to some people, but when I was growing up, there was a stigma attached to gaming. It was a nerdy thing, a geeky thing, uncool. Nobody ever talked about it. Now it was everywhere. It started becoming a more socially acceptable norm, and I'd attribute this to the massive influence that the 360 had and its blanket target approach. Now there were more gamers than ever, and the rush to release games promptly was a priority. General quality was now being sacrificed in order to meet these new market demands, so as a result, polish times and standards were reduced, and games were now heading to shelves in an unfinished state. Now, how could such a thing be possible, you may ask? Well, the foundation for this lazy approach had already been greatly established. It had become basically mandatory for a console to be connected to the internet, which allowed for the updates in the first place, and huge amounts of storage allowed for the updates to be whatever size they wanted, meaning the games could be as poorly coded and unfinished as the publishers dared, and all of these trends were set by Microsoft. But was this enough for Microsoft? No, it wasn't. They wanted more control and more restrictions for the consumer. It wasn't even about the games anymore. Now they wanted an all-in-one, locked-off, exclusive system. In comes the Xbox One. This was the biggest screw you to gamers I've ever seen. They wanted everything, they wanted it all, and they thought they could get it. Mandatory online, security checks, one game, one console, no second hand, outright domination. All dressed up as innovation, moving on with the times, glamour. It's an insult, not just to gamers, but everyone. It's this kind of thing that makes me wonder what the games industry would have been like without Microsoft's involvement. And I've got to say, probably better. We'd probably have still gotten games like Fable and Halo.
Shit! But that's horrible!
Those developers would have gone on to make games regardless of the Xbox. So really, through this greedy, fakey, low-effort miser of a platform, we inherited all of today's most hated gaming controversies. And now, with the Scorpio about to be revealed, this whole thing, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not even about us, it's about legacy. And it's about what we choose to leave behind for future generations. These choices, while seemingly insignificant, have wide-reaching implications. They reach beyond gaming, they affect everything. These choices say what we're willing to accept and how low we're willing to lower the bar. So that's why, in these coming weeks, for the first time in ever, we should pool together as gamers and make sure this bar doesn't get any lower. It's not about us. So what I'm saying, if I'm saying anything, is have a good Electronic Entertainment Expo 2017. Also screw Microsoft.
Well, I would think that...
It doesn't matter what you think, Bill.